Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my Stager YouTube channel. If you're meeting me for the first time, hello, my name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I'm an independent theatre critic and a content creator based here in the UK, and this is my Stager YouTube channel where I review the shows that I have been invited to go and see, and I talk about theatrical news and drama and gossip happening worldwide. Today I'm bringing you another review vlog because I was so lucky to be invited to go to the very prestigious off-West End venue, the Almeida Theatre, to go and see the premiere of the new musical Tammy-Faye, based on the life of the notorious televangelist Tammy-Faye Bakker. Now, I have been so looking forward to this press night and I'm so grateful that I got invited. Everyone wanted to be at this. This press night was a who's who of theatrical journalists and we were not allowed +1s. That is how exclusive it was. It is also a very small venue, which contributes to that issue. But I want to tell you a little bit why I was so excited for this show, because Tammy-Faye Bakker is not somebody I know a great deal about. I am tangentially aware of her in popular culture. I know that there was a movie with Jessica Chastain. I've heard her mentioned on places like RuPaul's Drag Race, but she's very much not known within popular culture in the UK. She was this televangelist in the US, and she had this notorious downfall and this association with fraud being committed by her husband, and separately to that became this unlikely gay icon. And that is the extent of my knowledge about Tammy-Faye Bakker, and she's really, as I said, not very known here in the UK. What made me excited about this was A, the venue it is being produced at. The Almeida is synonymous over here with really great work. If they choose to stage a musical, chances are it's going to be a very rich and creative one. Previously, they recently revived Spring Awakening. They are where American Psycho the musical premiered. But also the creative team attached to this had me very excited. So it is being directed by Rupert Gold, who is also the artistic director of the venue. The score has been composed by Sir Elton John. You may know who that is, with lyrics by Jake Shears of the Sister Sisters and a book by James Graham. I'm going to talk more about all of their creative contributions in this video, but that, coupled with the casting of Olivier Award winner Katie Brayben and Broadway star Andrew Rannells, had me very excited. So in today's video, I'm going to be telling you all of my thoughts about this show. Did it live up to my lofty expectations, or was I bitterly disappointed? You will have to watch on to find out. But before you do, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you're subscribed to my Stager YouTube channel. I review new shows all of the time, and chances are you will like some more of my videos as well. Also, you can go find me at Mickey Joe Theatre on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to get some varied Stager content over on those platforms as well. And if you really enjoyed today's video, you can use the super thanks button down below to give me a tip that really helps me as a Stager content creator. Now let's talk about Tammy-Faye, shall we? So let's not beat around the bush any longer. Disappointingly, this was not a 5-star show for me. It was not terrible. I still enjoyed a lot of it. And it had some great performances, and it had a lot of great content, and it was very entertaining, and it was very clever, and it was very creative. But I do think, relative to the show that it could have been, it did have some shortcomings, and it did disappoint me in a few aspects, and it did have some flaws that need to be addressed, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I have been teetering between a 3 and a 4-star verdict for this. I'm literally still weighing it as I talk to you right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through everything I feel about the show, and I'm hoping that talking it through is going to help me decide between these two things. It's not a 2 because it's not bad, and it's not a 5 because it's not perfect. So by the time we've got through this video, you and I will have made a decision about this show together. And I think we'll start by talking about the creative team and each of their contributions to this material. So the way that this show is framed is we first meet Tammy-Faye Bakker towards the end of her life when she is receiving treatment for a cancer diagnosis, and it then flashes back to sort of her origin story as this notorious televangelist character, with her and her husband Jim Bakker and their friends going to visit the very famous pastor Billy Graham. Pastor? At the time, they were touring around with these puppets trying to bring Christianity to kids, and they managed to launch themselves onto this satellite television network. And like many other evangelists at the time, they try and create a platform for themselves to bring Christianity to the people through television, through the emerging medium of television. Except their show has a difference. It is a lot less doom and gloom and fire and brimstone and scripture and righteousness and reckoning. It is more entertainment and dance numbers and fun and joy and bringing the love and warmth of Jesus and God into people's homes. Which, if we can ignore the whole aspect of religious indoctrination, is a nice thing to want to do. As the show progresses, we follow their ascent, while also seeing criticism of them from some of their contemporaries who think that what they are doing is undermining the values of the church and the agenda of the church in the US at that time, which was tethering themselves to the success of Ronald Reagan and the Republican Party and making its values synonymous with Christian values to unite Christians behind the Republican Party, which was a fascinating political subplot. And a lot of the first act moves towards this big focus on Jim. Now, the writing generally is extremely campy. It feels like almost at times a parody of a historical story because everything is so tongue-in-cheek. Everything is played so ironically and unrealistically. And it's funny and it's kooky and you get a lot of laughs. And that's great to begin with, but after a certain amount of time, it starts to grate and it all begins to feel a little bit insincere and a little bit inauthentic. And I was waiting for the curtain of it all to drop and to see something real and gritty. And because we had sustained this campy delivery style for so long, it felt like it needed to be a substantial moment where it was all ripped away and we had this set reveal or something. And what ended up happening was it was more of a gradual introduction of grittier, more realistic themes. Reality came to confront them, but it didn't do so theatrically in as striking a way as I was expecting. And that, I guess, is the responsibility of the writing, but also of the director, Rupert Gold. The script I really enjoyed. So many of the scenes were brilliantly written, and this was the work of James Graham. Now, James Graham is a hugely accomplished playwright here in the UK. I am a huge fan of much of his work, and I, for the longest time, have been advocating playwrights being utilised as book writers for musical theatre, because so often when we see new musicals, the book is the thing that draws the most criticism. And this is why I think great playwrights ought to be collaborating on new musicals and helping to write those books. There's a lot of great musicals throughout history, like Ragtime off the top of my head, that are great because they have books written by accomplished playwrights. Another recent example, MJ the Musical, has a book by Lynn Nottage. But I really enjoy James Graham's script here. He has some brilliantly barbed one-liners. He mines to the emotional core of so many of the scenes in the short time that he has, because you don't have a lot of time as a book writer on a musical to really get to the meat of all of the issues that you are exploring. Then we go into the songs, and they're good. I enjoy Elton John's melodies here, but if you were to blindfold me and take me into a dark room and play me these songs, I don't know that I could tell you without having already known that they were Elton John songs. I sort of miss his distinctive flair that you can hear in so much of his work. Where's all of the brilliant Elton John modulations that make me love everything else he's done so much? Where's the theatricality he normally brings to stuff? They are fine, great songs, but it's not until the last two numbers in the show that I start to really get on board with the melodies. Those numbers are If You Came to See Me Cry and See You in Heaven. There's other numbers I enjoy, but those two are definitely the strongest in the show. Now, it's at this point that we need to have a conversation about the lyrics. So the lyrics from Jake Shears, they have some good moments, and there's some good lines. If You Came to See Me Cry, I like that as a lyric, but outside of the title of that song, I don't like many of the lyrics of the rest of it. And throughout the show, I started to realise how much I disliked a lot of these lyrics. A lot of it feels as though it was written with a rhyming dictionary, or without a rhyming dictionary, because there's some half rhymes that they try and get away with that simply don't rhyme. I wasn't writing them down, but I was dumbfounded occasionally that they're trying to rhyme things that just straight up aren't rhymes. And I don't think rhyming is the most important component of any of these things. They were just generally uninspired lyrics that didn't articulate the character's feelings nearly as well or nearly as characteristically as James Graham's writing had in the scenes. And it stuck out for that reason. When you have a character who is so clearly putting themselves across in their own voice when speaking, and then they sing and they're not able to really say anything, or they stall on this one emotional moment and you don't go through an arc within the context of the song the same way you did in a scene, then it's disappointing. And that's when a song will start and you start to think, oh no, please don't start singing, because you were getting so much done. I was finding out so much about you, this scene was going in such an interesting direction, and I know that when you start singing, everything is going to grind to a halt. Even with the song If You Came to See Me Cry, I was struggling listening to that because it was never resolved. The conditional title of it was never satisfied. The line ended with "If you came to see me cry," and there was never any sense of what the consequence of "if you came to see me cry" was. At one point, she said, "You might as well go home, I think, if you came to see me cry," but then it kept being repeated, "if you came to see me cry," and it didn't always make sense. It sort of felt like it was missing half of the sentence. Some other creative contributions I want to talk about. The set, which of course is by Bunny Christie, because every time I love a set, I find out that it's Bunny Christie. It is wonderful. You have these cutouts at the back, you have this sort of grid of squares that pull up and reveal people, and that's used for a great many purposes, but it's kind of like different TV screens, and you see people as if they're in TV screens, and it's used for that sometimes. It's used for other purposes as well. They are lit up when they're being covered, and they make the shape of a cross or various other things, or an American flag. It's very versatile, the way that that can be used, and it's very clever. There's this big frame that comes forward that again looks like a TV screen, potentially underused. And what I really like that Rupert Gold does here, I could call it taking a trick out of Ivo van Hove's book, but he is not the only director to use this. We have projections of a live video feed of the actors onto the back wall. So you have these moments where Katie Brayben is telecasting and it's being projected live on the wall behind her. That's very effective, and it's a great reminder to us that what we're seeing is being simultaneously broadcast live within the context of the show. I would also be remiss not to mention Suzanne Scotcher, who is credited as the wig supervisor. There was some excellent wig work on this show. I loved many of these wigs. On the women, on the men, some very great period-appropriate wig use. The performances were really great. Katie Brayben in particular is sensational as Tammy-Faye Bakker. I mean, there's a reason that she is an Olivier Award winner. There's a reason that she has become Rupert Gold's muse, and he likes to work with her over and over again. I've seen her in a few things before, but I've never got to see her being this sublime or this meaty a role and this fascinating a character, because Tammy-Faye Bakker, she really is this fascinating contradiction of things, where she's from this conservative Christian background and became this larger-than-life flamboyant ally to the gay community in a time and coming from a perspective that was so separate to that was so against that during the AIDS crisis, speaking out on behalf of the gay community, on behalf of AIDS patients during that time. She's really a fascinating character, and Katie Brayben finds so many shades within that. There is a fragility to what she plays, there is an honesty, but there is also a toughness, there is an obstinance, and you have this kind of a moral question with her throughout the show. There's a sense that she is being judged, and in the show's conclusion, we come to find out why that is. But Katie portrays her very honestly. Here you have someone who arguably is very knowingly involved in embezzling the donated funds of innocent people to fund an increasingly lavish lifestyle, and she doesn't cover that up, but she does perform in a way that at least justifies her own behaviour to herself, and she makes a case for Tammy-Faye Bakker that's very compelling. And when she sings, my gosh, I mean, the acting through song is sublime. When she gets to the higher register in her voice, the way that she performs, the way that she delivers those notes, there is still an unmistakable Carole King vibe to her voice. It is still very much got a country twang. It's so characterful and it's so passionate, and it has such a raw edge to it that it's really wonderful. It's such a theatrical voice, and it's the reason why the few torch songs that she gets over the course of the show become these really great numbers. I will also say she ages not dramatically, but over a few decades within the course of this show, and I have never seen anyone play subtle aging between scenes quite so carefully and quite so well as Katie does. It's not a pronounced shift. It's not like she's going from super young to super old, even though we see her at various different ages over the course of the show. But just the subtle differences over time, you can feel her adapting and evolving, and she really grows as a character from someone who's completely devoted to and sort of blindly following the whims of her husband to this much more independent force that she becomes by the end of it. Now, speaking of her husband, Broadway star Andrew Rannells plays Jim Bakker, and I was so excited to get to see Andrew Rannells on stage. I'm a huge fan of him in various other things. This is a great role for him. I love that he is getting to play these more in-depth characters. Here he is playing a man who is grappling with financial issues, who is grappling potentially with closeted homosexuality that he is trying to reconcile with his faith that has become this self-defining characteristic, that he is this preacher. And he's very well suited to this. He does this whole slicked, slightly spineless thing very well, but he can still put a song across with excellent panache. I think the best thing that Andrew Rannells ever does on a stage is delivering those up-tempo song and dance man style of songs. Think All American Prophet in the Book of Mormon, or when he did the number in the prom movie, Love Thy Neighbor, which ironically would be very at home in the Tammy-Faye musical, but he gets a number just like that in this show. It's called Heritage USA, it goes on for a very long time, and he delivers it tirelessly from the front. It's hard to think of any actors that we have over here in the UK that could deliver it with quite that much panache. It's very much a Broadway style of performance. But as great as he is at all of the showbiz stuff, it's his breakdown in the second act that has really stayed with me. He has this brilliant, fragile and broken last scene with Tammy-Faye, and his acting in it is just completely heartbreaking and so vulnerable, more so than I've ever seen him be in anything else. Now, Zubin Vala plays an antagonist of sorts. He plays a rival evangelist who is trying to manipulate the current political climate and who is trying to engineer the downfall of Tammy-Faye and Jim Bakker in order to guarantee his own prosperity, because they are growing bigger and bigger and they are drawing people away from other channels and from watching other evangelists and other preachers. He presents a fascinating character. He doesn't quite have enough material at the beginning for me to foreshadow the motives that he will go on to have. He just sort of arrives quite abruptly as this villainous type, but what he does with everything he has is, as you would expect from the wonderful Zubin Vala, very nuanced, very layered, a meticulously crafted characterization, and some brilliantly delivered vocals. His first song that he sings is wildly Javert Stars-esque. And my only complaint about it is nothing to do with his performance, but it has this lyric that sort of reads as though it's comedic, but he's playing the whole thing very seriously and sincerely. It's another moment in that first act where we don't really know tonally what the show is trying to be. Now, he is just unflinchingly and remorselessly intense and not best pleased throughout the course of the show. I would like to see maybe a couple of different shades of characterization from him. I think there's scope for him to grow slightly in agitation, or to show a little menacing glee when things are starting to go his way. Just some little moments of fluctuation throughout his delivery, because he's quite stoic in his consistent bad guy mode. Gosh, that sentence started so eloquently, and then how did we end it? Bad guy mode. Well done, Mickey J. I also have to shout out a couple of standouts in the supporting cast, Richard Dempsey and Amy Booth Steele. Richard Dempsey is throwing everything he has at this role. The commitment to the little moments that he gets are fantastic, and Amy Booth Steele can steal a scene from you so very easily. She does not have to do much, and she will take that entire scene away. She's fantastic, with the littlest facial expression or little vocal inflection or little raised eyebrow. The audience knows exactly what she is communicating comedically. She has pitched her comedy take on this character so perfectly that we get her completely from the beginning, and every joke that she makes lands throughout the rest of the show. Brava to Amy Booth Steele. So there was lots that I did enjoy about this show. I liked a lot of the early tone of it. I just wish that that had melted away more clearly into where we were going to end up. I knew that where we were going was going to have to get grittier and starker at some point. I just wish that there had been a more pronounced shift and we'd understood the reasons for those shifts. And there were the perfect moments to set it up as well. There's a moment where Jim says to Tammy, "This isn't real, none of this is real, we're alone in a studio." And that would have been a great moment to have some sort of big lighting shift or set shift to reveal something. Even if they had been in this smaller box and then the walls of it had gone up at some point or fallen down, I just needed some sort of abrupt pulling of the rug out from under Tammy and the audience simultaneously so that this campy, colourful facade was revealed to be just that. My biggest issue with the show was this. We needed more Tammy-Faye. I feel like for it having been her story, it got a little bit sidelined, and there were great moments in the show where we were moving on with the plot and she was very absent from that. Essentially, every time she came on stage, she would sing a great song or she would have a great moment by herself, but she did not engage much with the other characters. So I wanted her on stage more, but every time we got her on stage, the plot slowed to a halt. They only seemed to be able to progress the plot in her absence, and that's an issue for a biopic of her life. Like I said, there were some really great moments. The end of Act 1 is a great moment, although plot-wise, it did feel very familiar to me of the end of Act 1 of Beautiful. Whether I'm just saying that because Katie Brayben played both of those roles, I do not know, but it's more or less the same setup that leads to the same dramatic musical moment. I want to talk a little bit as well about how they handle LGBT themes throughout the show, because there are some beautiful, very sincere and wonderfully handled moments. There are also a handful of others where LGBT characters become the butt of that joke, and I know that this is written by multiple gay men. Even so, I do think that the gay characters, who are mostly tangential to this plot, except for the one substantial interview moment that Tammy-Faye has with an AIDS patient, I think they're commodified a little bit. All of the references to the LGBT community that were so significant in Tammy-Faye Bakker's life, I think, are a little bit commodified in this show. There are a few really great highlight moments in this. I mean, Katie Brayben has some numbers that she just delivers that are fantastic. The last number that she gets in the show is probably the highlight for me. If You Came to See Me Cry, when the ensemble slowly join her at the side of the stage. I want them to be more present in an earlier moment she has when she hosts the TV show that her and Jim had been hosting for the first time by herself, and we see what a breakout star she is and why the show is going to go on to become so successful, and we start to see the magic that she brings as an individual. I want the ensemble present in that because then it will echo again later. There's some really great staging and some really brilliant theatrical tension and menace and threat in a second act number called Bring Me the Face of Tammy-Faye Bakker, I believe it's called. Let me check in my program, excuse me. Yes, I got it right, good for me. I like the way that that number is staged, utilising the ensemble. It has so much energy, it has so much drama and so much tension, but it does make me realise that we've been missing that up to that point in the show. So I feel like whenever they stage that number, they ought to have gone back and said, this is the energy that we need to bottle and infuse into the earlier moments of the show. I think there's a lack of use of the ensemble throughout the beginning of the first act. Maybe the show needs an opening number. Maybe if we're going to have this chorus who end up being in judgment of Tammy-Faye, we need to hear from them earlier on about their love for her so that we can see it turning. You know, we shouldn't only hear from her public for the first time when they have felt betrayed by her and they are turning against her. We need to hear the outpouring of love and support at the beginning so that we realise there's been a shift without simply being told by the plot. Another standout moment is a filthy song in Act 1 that I do not want to spoil for you, but it's so well played, it's so tongue-in-cheek, and they're just beautifully oblivious to the wonderfully filthy lyrics that they are singing. So what do we think then on Tammy-Faye? Was this a 3-star or a 4-star show for me? I never give half-star ratings, and on balance, I like some of the material, I liked all of the performances, I like a lot of moments in the show a lot. I just think for what it could have been and for the theatrical potential that it had, and that this character and that this story had, it had a lot of shortcomings. I could go on listing other things. There were moments specifically where I thought, ooh, that punchline really doesn't land, that needs to be reworked. This moment could benefit from having this other character introduced. There were moments that needed to be trimmed down, to be cut. The ending of the show comes as a surprise because aesthetically it doesn't match what we're expecting to see, because we started with her in the same scene. She doesn't look the same way as when we go back to that same scene. So the fact that we find out that that's where we are and then the ending is a bit of a twist, that doesn't quite make sense. I think there's room for a completely different framing device altogether if we were to understand from the beginning that this is Tammy-Faye ascending possibly to heaven and being judged for the choices she's made throughout her life, and that all being considered, and we know that from the beginning, then that might be more rewarding. Or if it was to have this chorus of people in judgment of Tammy-Faye, and we are seeing her life through a moral perspective, and it's a moral lesson, and we're to look at it from that sense, then maybe that as well. But I just think that it's been a little too formulaic in a biopic structure, and it could have done something more interesting. But it is realistically very entertaining. I don't think the issues I have described lower it to a 3-star show. I think I'm going to give this a 4-star because there is still some exceptional work being done here, some exceptional creativity, and Katie Brayben's performance alone elevates the thing to such heights. Andrew Rannells is just as brilliant opposite her. So for me, Tammy-Faye is a 4-star show. And those are my thoughts on the Tammy-Faye musical at the Almeida Theatre. If you're one of the lucky few who has already seen this show, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you're going to be seeing it while it's at the Almeida, if you were able to get tickets before the run basically sold out, let me know about that as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stage YouTube channel for plenty more content just like this coming very soon, including lots of other reviews of new shows. Also, if you would like to support me as a Stagey content creator, you can use the super thanks button down below to give me a little tip. That really helps me to make regular content just like you're watching right now, or you can go to patreon.com/MickeyJoeTheatre. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!